Hi folks, my name is Linda Emmett and welcome to Happiness is an Inside Job. We are the creators of our own reality, we create our own lives. Our mind is our biggest limit and it's our own beliefs, behaviours and habits constantly caught in those cycles that keep us trapped where we are and stand in the way of our own happiness. So throughout this podcast, we're going to take a deep dive into some of those beliefs, habits and patterns, where they show up in your lives and what you can do to change them. Hi Noodles and welcome aboard this week's podcast. And on this week's podcast, what I want to talk about is healthy relationships. And in part, a connection is so vital to our happiness, our well-being, and we absolutely thrive on connection. And for every one of us, because of our habits, patterns, and our very beliefs themselves, we often find ourselves in relationships that aren't as positive or healthy or growth promoting as we deserve or we need. So first off, folks, if I was to ask you, what you believe healthy relationships are built on, and just for a moment even think about that. To you, what does a healthy relationship mean? For all of us, a healthy relationship actually involves, honesty, speaking from your truth, from who you are, trust in that person, whatever you say to them, that they'll hold dear, trust that they have your back, that they're there to support you, respect, open communication, which I think is something that we'll always be unlearning our old habits when it comes to communication and our old patterns, what it was safe to say, what it wasn't safe to say. And this shows up, between our partner relationships, our work relationships, friendships, colleagues, co-workers. It shows up in every relationship we have. And for some of us, it can show up stronger in our love relationships as opposed to our work relationships, depending on what our own limiting beliefs are. And firstly, in a partner relationship, or anyone, to be honest, there shouldn't be an imbalance of power. Relationships should never be built on power, because that's where control comes in. Partners that respect each other's independence, that live lives separate from each other, can make their own decisions without fear of retribution, retaliation, rage, and sharing decisions. These are all vital to our relationships being healthy. So when we look around at our own relationships, be it with our loved ones, our children, our siblings, our partners, friends, colleagues, you have to look and ask yourself, first off, to change anything, how much of your relationships contain the ingredients they need to make it a healthy one that you will thrive in, one you'll grow in, one you'll feel loved, supported, taken care of, one that your needs are met. Because again, they're so vital to our well-being. They're something that I really want us to focus on today, because we do at any point have the absolute power to make changes in any of the relationships we have. We're caught a lot of the time in, as they say, are stuck in our own habits and patterns. And this can cause us, I suppose, to self-abandon, where we show up in our relationships playing a role. I know for women, certainly, it's trained into our culture from a young age that we're to be nurturing. So often getting that nurturing back isn't something that we're comfortable with. For men, it's to be the protector, the provider, and they're hereditary beliefs we've carried down through generations. So to shake them off within our relationships does require the work. And for women, as I say, our communication can really be stifled when it comes to asking what we need, because of that training where we hear the old voices that we once heard when we were children. This starts with our communication, actually using our own voices. And when I say that, that's not just to speak it, but it's coming from where you truly are, how you truly feel. And we often find this so difficult within our relationships, to speak our true thoughts, or to give our perspective, to give our opinion on things, how we truly feel, or what we really think about a decision that we're making. We can often leave our own emotions at the door. And as I say, this can show up in an array of spaces, be it in in our workspace, with friends, with family, with loved ones, with partners. It can actually block us from going out and starting new relationships because we are aware that we felt frustrated, overwhelmed, or stressed within our last relationship. We felt we abandoned ourselves, or none of our needs were met. So again, folks, this starts with us. This starts with being honest with ourselves and having that vulnerability to say, this is what I need. I cannot do it all by myself. I'm not an island. I do have needs. I do have desires. I do have wants. And I want to have the ability to ask for them. So starting off by understanding what we need and allowing ourselves not to hide our vulnerabilities and not to, abandon our vulnerabilities and asking for what we desire. And I often see, what often happens is it's the shadow side of the self, the more abandoned parts, the parts we don't like to bring into our relationships, the needy side, the side that needs support, that needs affection, that needs love, that wants to be told, I love you, I want to be with you. We naturally can need to hear those things because in different relationships, communication styles and love styles are different, and we can often think that our needs aren't being met, but that other person is just has a different way of showing their love. They do not understand that possibly you're used to seeing it or feeling it in a different way unless we communicate that out. So that's another thing that we need to understand is in our love relationships, what is your own love style and what is your partner's or your significant other's love style? How do they show it? How do you show it? And when it comes to communicating, when it comes to sharing what you need, what space do you have to do that? When do you talk about these things? Or do you talk about them at all? Because within our relationships, they say cheating is the number one breakup of relationships. What's actually the very first one, and again, I see it a lot with clients, is disengagement. We get to a point where we literally disengage. We're in the room, but we're not really there. Emotionally, we're not there. And that's the biggest breakdown of relationships. We start to disassociate, disconnect, because we're protecting our vulnerabilities, holding on to old hurts and protecting our hearts. And we carry all that with a belief that these things will never change. So what's the point? I'm not leaving myself to be open or to be hurt again. And therefore, whatever relationship that is, be it sibling, friendship, love, any of these, that relationship is then doomed. So if it is worth it, and if it is something that you truly want, it is the changing from within. Another person will bring you a certain level of happiness, but it's you being happy at your core and empowered in who you are to communicate what you need. Otherwise, you're stuck in the same patterns of irritation, frustration, and again, abandoning those parts of yourself that needs those things. Another thing we're not brilliant at, and some better than others, is boundaries. I am better in some spaces than I am in others. I still, at times in some of my relationships, wear that old hero cape, where I believe that I need to save people or help people, and I have to learn that's not always the case. I'm not a hero, I'm a human. It's not on me to save the world. People need to be willing and want to save themselves. So when it gets to a point when you have that recognition, it's setting boundaries. But this is for any relationship to thrive. We need to have healthy boundaries. We need to, healthy boundaries are you respecting you. You respecting you as a person, your time, your energy, and not allowing others to walk all over us, not giving away our power to others, be that in our decisions, in how we dress, how we look, where we meet, what we do, any of that. Because we will, if we're feeling disempowered within a relationship, it's no longer one we want to be in. So you've two choices: end that relationship or change that disempowerment. We often think because when we were growing up, we had that need to please, to be accepted, to be loved, and not to be rejected. We can often think that, being a nice person and being accepting is putting everyone else's needs ahead of our own. It's choosing what everyone else wants to do, how they want to be, ahead of what you want yourself. And this, over time, has a detrimental impact on your own mental health and your own well-being, because it directly tears away you getting any of your needs met? Are you meeting any of your own needs for yourself? And if we continue to breach our own boundaries, what happens is we lose a lot of respect for ourselves. And as you know, folks, the one relationship we're in from womb to tomb is the one we're in with ourselves. That's the one we need to repair first, because that's where we choose every other relationship from. That's our self-worth. That's our confidence in ourselves. So that's where every other relationship in your life is a reflection of that. It's a reflection of how you feel about yourself. So starting with yourself, implementing those boundaries, and I will move on to a few beautiful tools and tips on how to do that. But first, it's learning not to take responsibilities for other people's happiness. That is not on us. Other people's changes are on them, and the willingness has to be there within them to make those changes. If that's not there, all you can do is implement the boundaries to protect yourself from whatever negative behaviours are coming out from that person. It is not on you to put up and shut up and accept these things. What you need to be doing is minding yourself and setting those boundaries for yourself. And there's so many different types of boundaries. I mean, like, first off, there's physical boundaries. And for me, I've actually really had to work on my own physical boundaries because, it's a space that I wouldn't have been as comfortable in. And that comes from my own past. But some people are definitely far more tactile than others. This can show up in your love relationships, where some people need more love, more hugs, more holding hands, more affection, more linking. Not the hand holder myself, never have been, and I accept that is absolutely, it's just, it's not for me. I love the old hugs, but only with people I feel comfortable hugging. I don't feel comfortable hugging complete strangers. I don't feel comfortable hugging someone I've only met. So that's one of my boundaries. It's putting your hand out to shake someone's hand, patting them on the, doing what works for you, understanding your own physical boundaries and what makes you really uncomfortable. Because if you don't start implementing them, you're constantly going to be uncomfortable around those people. And this shows up in relationships in the sex sphere as well. It's, it's not about having sex when you don't feel like having sex. It's not about, having that intimacy when you don't feel like it. It's one, understanding what it is, why you don't feel like it, and two, having the power in your relationship to say, no, that's not something I want now, because it does tear away again at your self-worth if you're doing things that you don't want to be doing. You can often feel a little violated. So understanding and knowing what your own physical boundaries are really, it means they're things you can begin to openly talk about. Then we have our emotional boundaries, and that's in, how you allow people to speak to you, how you show up for yourself. Do you accept raised voices? Do you accept someone screaming, shouting, being aggressive? Do you allow emotional vampires literally suck the life out of you? All of these things. Time boundaries. That's another thing. And this can really, really be distressing for some people. If you've someone that relentlessly shows up late, we can find this really, really disrespectful. We can be hurt by it. Or if you're one of those people that constantly shows up late, that's what you're telling the other person. I did not respect you enough to show up on time. This is how they're taking it. So having an understanding of that and recognising your own behaviours within that. Financial boundaries is another one that shows up, be it in work, knowing what your worth is and actually standing by that and accepting it, not taking on other people's roles, not doing other people's work for them, pushing that back on them, and owning what you're worth. If you're worth, and if you deem yourself worthy of a particular amount, making sure that you have that, use that communication, have that conversation and get your worth. It also shows up in your closer relationships. You having some control over, or all the control over, your own finances, over your own money, regardless of whether some of that is pulled or whatever way it works, but you feeling empowered within that. No one else having control over your financial well-being. All of these are healthy boundaries within relationships, and we do need them all for our relationships to work. So some of the things you can look at, and just to test your own boundaries, to see your own communications, to see where you're not showing up for you within your relationships and what's really irking you, is, how many times in a day, a week, do you say yes when you want to say no. And this shows up in the workspace quite a bit. When you're saying yes to taking on more tasks, doing more roles, when you want to say no, that impacts your time boundaries and your work-life balance. When you're saying yes to meeting friends, when you know you're exhausted, you know you don't have the time, but again, the people pleasing is kicking in. You don't want to hurt people. You don't want to, have FOMO. So you're saying yes when you should be saying no for you, for your health and your needs. It's making that commitment to yourself. When you notice yourself feeling overwhelmed, tired, frustrated, it's asking yourself what you're doing for you. How high or low are you on your own priority list? Where do you fit into your week? What are the things you love and how much are you doing them? That's basic self-care. Are you staying up late at night? Is your sleep being impacted? Are you having 3-hour phone calls when all you want to do is be in bed? It's all of these things. And what we're doing is we're compromising ourselves and our own well-being within that relationship. So these are just healthy boundaries. This is not being selfish. And we often think it is, so we won't do these things for ourselves. It's looking in your life, where do you feel really, really pressured? In what relationships does that show up again? Is it with work, friends, going on outings, wherever it shows up for you? Are there people in your life you're constantly accommodating? And this shows up a lot within family patterns because they're the most ingrained because they're the oldest. Is there people that you're constantly accommodating within your family that has been irking on you, sitting on you for a while? Because if you're not communicating that out, it is coming out in your behaviours. Whether it's passive aggressive, whether it's spending less time with them, you are showing it. So communicating it ends your own frustration and it gives you back that power within your relationships. Allowing yourself to have those conversations. Why is it you aren't? What are the limiting beliefs going on there? What do you believe will happen if you have that conversation? A lot of the time, it can't be worse than how you're feeling not having the conversation. And at least then you will feel empowered. And if you don't get the responses you want within that conversation, that in itself will tell you something. But within that, by having the convo, you have earned your own respect and a lot more respect from that other person. So all it is a benefit. When you're going into any communication, ask yourself, what is the outcome I want from this? What is it that I need? Try and shift to someone else's perspective, the person you're speaking to. What way could they be taking this? What could they be feeling? What way could they take what I'm saying to them? When you're going in calm and confident, already you're going in with a different energy. So that's the energy that will meet you. Before having any of these conversations, set yourself some non-negotiable boundaries for yourself. Set yourself the lines you will and will not cross within that conversation. We can tend to negotiate ourselves back out of what we want a lot of the time because, we see their face, we see their reality, we see that. Diffuse that, no problem, but don't give everything up. Set yourself non-negotiable boundaries before you go in, and that is it. You are not crossing the line. Look at, what you want the most from this, and then come from there, because from that you're respecting your own needs and wants. You're respecting what you desire, what you deserve, and you're building your own confidence and your own worth. The bottom line is it's on somebody, it's on the other person to respect their own boundaries. It's on them to defend them, to go to ask for what they need. And you're opening up that space. You're creating that space to do that. So allowing yourself those non-negotiable boundaries, shifting from them and learning that within every communication that you're doing, be it in work, with friends, whoever it is, having those boundaries, whether it's I don't go out on a Wednesday night, that's me self-care night, I'm not going to stay past a certain time in work, or I'm not, this element isn't my role, or within your personal relationships, I'm not going to accept the way that person speaks to me. I'm not going to accept that attitude. If someone else is stressed, distressed, any of those things, I am absolutely willing to have a conversation, but I'm not going to accept that ill treatment. I'm no one's emotional punch bag. It's things like this. It's being aware of how that impacts you and what boundaries you need to set and what you need to say to change that. And all of this does move you towards having a much healthier relationship that is built on respect, trust, dignity, boosting your self-worth and your confidence, and this is what we all need. This is what we all deserve. And we need to come from that space to create that space in our external world. But before that, we need to have the internal world built with the non-negotiable boundaries, using our voice and knowing how we deserve to be treated. And this is what creates our happiness both internally and externally, because one mirrors the other. How we feel about ourselves and how we treat ourselves, we mirror in all our relationships. So that's it for me for this week, guys. I hope you really enjoyed it and got some fabulous takeaways. And as always, I invite you to connect in with me across social media, or check me out on my website, www.yourgifttoyou.com, or email me, linda@yourgifttoyou.com, guys, because I'd love to hear from you and any topics you'd like for us to talk about, or any more learnings that you want. And please remember, give me those reviews, because it keeps the podcast getting out there to more people. So chat to you very soon, guys. Bye bye.